Hi everyone, my name is Uzma Quresh and I'm gender specialist at the World Bank. It is my great pleasure to open International Women's Day by the World Bank today, which is part of our 100-day campaign called Girls Learn, Women Earn, to support girls' education and women's economic empowerment in Pakistan. Through this campaign, Girls Learn, Women Earn, we have been able to connect with several organizations across Pakistan that have shared their key achievements, what they have done on these two important issues. They have also shared their action plans, what they're planning to do in the next 1 year to support this cause. World Bank is also supporting South Asia Women in the Workforce Week from 8th to 13th of March, and we have a very special in the Spotlight series chat between World Bank country directors and prominent women's economic empowerment experts. Pakistan is kickstarting this today with our very first live chat series between Dr. Sania Nishtar, who is the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Poverty Alleviation and Social Protection, and our World Bank's Country Director, Elango Pechamutu. Thank you very much to both of you for your immense support and for coming here today to be part of this initiative. This session is being live streamed on Facebook, so please tune in and please send us your comments, your questions. We would love to hear them. We would love to respond them. And please stay tuned in because there will be several other sessions on South Asia, women in the workforce, different discussions going on. And we will also be sharing our World Bank strategy, how we are addressing those constraints. Now, without further ado, I'll pose my first question to Dr. Sania. Dr. Sania, what do you think why women's economic empowerment is important for Pakistan?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate the World Bank on this wonderful series of events that you've been holding for the last couple of months. The government is really very appreciative, and we're very happy to partner with you on this. In terms of your question, women's economic empowerment is crucial for the country's national progress, and the present government realizes it very critically. Because any country that aspires to be a middle-income country a few years down the line has to be absolutely sure that it will not be there unless 50% of its population is mainstreamed into the economic sphere. We know, for instance, and data tells us and screams loudly at us that the economic participation of women currently stands at 20%. And this is, in the region, it's the lowest other than Afghanistan. So we're the second lowest. In terms of financial inclusion, which is the bedrock on which mainstreaming into the economic sphere happens, we currently stand at 11%. So with these kind of numbers, the national aspiration of being a middle-income country a couple of years down the line is certainly off track, which is why we as the government clearly recognize that in order for us to move towards our economic aspirations, women really have to be mainstream in the economy very meaningfully and very quickly. And on the other side, when you look at data, we clearly have evidence that if women are mainstreamed into the economy effectively, if the gender gap is closed in economic participation, we clearly see what's on the horizon. The GDP growth can be increased by 30%. So in view of where we stand today and in view of the very clear realization that we could be at a certain point in the very near future by closing the gender gap, in view of these realities, the government is very conscious that we need to move very quickly and effectively and very meaningfully.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sania.
And this is not the only reason, I beg your pardon, you know, the economic argument is not the only reason. I mean, in my area, in particular, the social sectors, we know that closing the gender gap is one of the most effective means of progress on health and education outcomes. Wherever there's been massive quantum strides in reducing maternal mortality, in increasing immunization rates, women's education has been a very important determinant. So it makes good economic sense. but closing the gender gap is extremely important for social outcomes as well. And I think that we need not just to look at women at the entry level, we have to look at the equation right all the way up to the top. So at the leadership level as well, because we know that whenever women are at the leadership position, it's other women who stand to benefit as well. And it has a knock-on effect on, again, on education and health and on a number of different social outcomes. So the government is very acutely aware that this is a very important agenda that we have to drive very effectively.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sania. I totally agree with you. It is a development issue, and unless we give equal opportunities to girls and women, this issue can't be tackled. My question to you, Ilango, adding on to what Dr. Sania very eloquently just mentioned, what do you think are some key barriers to women's economic empowerment in Pakistan, considering its very low rate of women's economic participation?
Thank you, Uzma. Let me warmly welcome Dr. Sania to the World Bank Group campus. It's a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Sania. And I always get inspired by the way you have inspired many in this country. I know there are many. You have a very strong fan following of what you've achieved over the years. So it's a pleasure to have this conversation with you. So Uzma, to your question about what holds women back, let's reimagine Pakistan 30 years from now. Everything is working very well like many other countries. And you see girls in school with boys, you see women in the workforce without facing any discrimination. That would be the dream that Quaid-e-Azam himself dreamt in 1947 when Pakistan was founded. So coming back to today's Pakistan, what are the big challenges holding women back? There is not one single challenge I can point to. There are many challenges. Let me foremost begin with girls in school. Now, if you look at the primary and secondary enrollment rates, it's around 75 and 84% in Pakistan when compared to a much higher numbers in the rest of South Asia. So that's a big constraint, is to encourage parents to keep girls in school. Second is girls' marriage is a constraint, and that takes them away from studying as well as starts creating other health challenges for them. Then coming to women, if you look at the overall, as Dr. Sania was saying, on the labor force participation, it's 1 in 4, 26% of women are in the labor force. And one has to analyze why there are more women in the workforce, and it goes to the social cultural factors. But if you look at the last labor skills survey, it says that only 1 in 3 women feel they can go alone to a clinic or a marketplace, and only 1 in 2 feel they're safe and secure for them to walk on their own on the streets. So these are some of the supply side challenges that the women face. When it comes to the demand side, especially on the employability of women, I think still a lot of the Pakistani firms are stuck in the old mindset that it's too expensive to hire women because the greater benefits and privileges need to be given to them. Then if you employ women, you have to account for and provide for childcare. Many of them are still not ready for it. This is very important. And then finally, you also start seeing a wage gap, and this largely comes from the skills mix, and there's a big perception challenge. So these are some of the challenges I see as to why today the gender gap is fairly wide in Pakistan. And I'm excited by the fact that this presents a huge set of development opportunities that Dr. Sania mentioned. And this is where we see, engendering development should be the goal of every development agency, as Dr. Sania said, as is the government's priority.
Thank you so much, Ilango, for pointing this out, like Dr. Sania also said and you also mentioned, from demand side, why it is so important to work on behaviors and attitudes. Because unless we work on them, we won't be able to see any tangible change in our society when it comes to women's empowerment on any issue. Dr. Sania, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are some of the key government initiatives on women's economic empowerment?
Well, I'd like to start with data, because if you don't have access to data and you're not disaggregating data and using it for monitoring your programs, no matter what you commit, no matter what you articulate in policy, no matter what your aspirations are, you will not be able to fulfill them. And we're very pleased to be launching in collaboration with the World Bank the Data for Pakistan portal this afternoon, actually.
Yeah.
As part of SARS, which is the welfare program I run, we have an absolute commitment to gender disaggregating data at every level and using it for monitoring as well. For instance, just the other day, I was looking at the loans program, and I noticed that there was a 41% allocation towards women, whereas there is a stated commitment towards at 50%. That immediately allowed me to do a course correction and tell the implementers where they need to be. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of data, number one. Secondly, in terms of your question, the government's initiatives, I completely second what Elango has said. Education, age of marriage, labor, workforce participation are the three very important aspects, and of course the government is very committed. In terms of specific initiatives, the inheritance ordinance that the government has brought, I think, is crucially important. And of course, we look forward to effective implementation. The second aspect is the strides that we've made in financial inclusion. So the new Kafalat program, the implementing agency for which is the BISP, has ensured the financial inclusion of 7 million women with one stroke of policy. That is quite an important initiative. Then, of course, the pieces of legislation that our provincial governments have been doing with regard to the recognition of work of domestic workers, of rural women whose work is seen as an extension of their domestic responsibilities, Sindh and Punjab in particular. That is very critically important. Number 4, the work that has recently been done with respect to SARS in relation to the Labour Expert Working Group's recommendations, which are now on their way to implementation, and that also relate to recognition of the work of domestic workers.
Awesome.
The family planning piece, the revitalization of a task force around family planning, which has been dormant for a very long time. The President of Pakistan now chairs the task force on family planning. And I think that is the most critically important piece.
Yeah.
If there was one thing which I would highlight, it would be family planning. It is so crucial for Pakistan. Just yesterday I was in Momand agency, and most of the women that I spoke to who were part of the Kafalat program had more than 8 children. And one of them had 12 children. She was so emaciated. She was in such bad health that I actually had to hold her with my hand and help her navigate that one step as she was receiving her envelope from the Prime Minister. It was just heartbreaking. So the family planning piece. And then, of course, in SARS, we have the 50% rule. Whether it's scholarships, whether it is loans, whether it is any social protection benefit, whether it is the graduation initiative, it has to be 50% plus. So Kafalat is 100% for women. Our Amdan program, which is the income program, which the Prime Minister launched a couple of weeks ago, through which we give the assets predicated on the understanding that will allow the women to graduate out of poverty, is 60% strictly for women. The loans is strict 50% for women. The scholarships, the need-based undergraduate scholarships is 50% for women. And I actually had to fight at various different levels to make a policy prescription for that. Because lots of people would come around and tell me, well, why are you allocating 50% undergraduate scholarships for women? They will get married and never work. And I turned around and told them that's exactly what we have to change.
Yeah.
And the Prime Minister and most of the cabinet members squarely stood behind the decision. So the 50% rule, the initiation of work on family planning, and I have to admit that there's a long way to go there.
Yeah.
The first time emphasis on the work-related legislation, the very tangible steps that follow from that, the evidence base that we're building, the financial inclusion piece, the 50% rule, the inheritance piece, and the emphasis on girls' education, the effective implementation of the Age of Marriage Act in the province where it exists, and initiation of work in other provinces to actually push them, and I use the word push very carefully, to push them to actually enact that into legislation. The other pieces of legislation related to women's participation in the labor workforce, which have to do with the timings, their protection, is critically important. And then let me not forget the sexual harassment aspect, or more broadly the harassment aspect. We've got what is called the governance and integrity policy, which is the overarching umbrella for governance in SRs, and as part of the rubric of that framework, sexual harassment is one aspect of the 27 facets that we very aggressively follow through our governance observatory. So pieced together, these various initiatives are building an ecosystem. But as I said earlier, there are two critical aspects of that, because the aspiration is on one side, but then the active implementation is the other piece. And to that effect, disaggregating data by gender and keeping a very close eye and using those data for policy, for remedial action as far as policies and implementation is concerned, is one aspect. And the second part is, of course, effective implementation of stated policy and legislation is another. We're trying our best, but there's a long way to go. And the Women in Movement Agency just reiterates the importance of keeping a very close eye.
Thank you so much for this very comprehensive overview of government's plan at the policy and also at the implementation level. It goes without saying, yes, we have all heard about several policy and legislative initiatives by the government, by provincial governments, which is totally, very, very much appreciated. But yes, implementation is key, and like you said, sex disaggregated data is key to move forward. And we would also like to see sex disaggregated data on businesses, and to improve business environment, we need to know how many women-owned businesses are getting support from the government. Thank you so much. Elango, my question to you is similar to what I asked Dr. Sania Nishtar. What is the World Bank doing to support women's economic empowerment agenda through its investment?
We have great people like you in our workforce.
Thank you.
Is the first thing we've done is hire the best of capabilities to join our team, and that is enhancing our overall approach to supporting women's economic empowerment. But let me start with where Dr. Sania began her response to you, is data.
Yeah.
So at the World Bank, we thrive on data. For us, data means it produces the numbers. These numbers give us the evidence, and the evidence is what influences the design of our programs. So let me just cite two numbers. If women's economic empowerment and the education gender gaps are reduced, we are going to see only a big upside in the economy for Pakistan. Recent estimates say that annual growth rates could go up by at least 30%, which is a very significant part of what can be growth rates. There have been other numbers, like, say, for example, if the girls' marriages delayed, and then by 2025 you're looking at another $3 billion worth of new economic opportunities emerging. So these are very powerful way in which we use data, look at analytics, and then the evidence informs our design. So if I look at the World Bank more broadly, our strategy is anchored around 4 areas of engagement. One is around health and education. What can we do more for girls and women? Second is around on labor force participation, primarily on skilling and finding jobs and so on. Third is on voice and agency. And fourth is on asset ownership. And all these are 4 important areas. And when we have the World Bank finance investments, that when we do our due diligence, we have a very careful assessment of the gender dimensions of our support. And what we want to do is that every project should actually help women, and they become better off with our interventions than getting worse off. So we have internally in the World Bank something called tagging our projects for gender responsiveness. And nearly 3 in 4 projects are currently tagged to be gender responsive, which is, I think, a considerable achievement given the fact that we started from a low base line in Pakistan, and what the team has been able to achieve is tremendous. And this is a great achievement for my entire team, what they've been able to do, along with our clients at the federal and the provincial level. For example, let me again cite some numbers in health and education because of our nutrition project. Nearly 4 million women and girls have benefited from support. Similarly, like if you look at primary and secondary schools, you have nearly over 400,000 girls who have been enrolled in public secondary schools. These may look very small as numbers of achievement for Pakistan, but they are significant from the way the bank has financed these interventions. Similarly, in labor force participation, this is an actively new area. And where we are pushing hard is to work with the government on the right policy and regulatory regime, like sort of the home workers bill. If every province can have one, if it's implemented, it's going to have minimum guaranteed wage for women, it's going to have minimum working hours. So this is going to improve overall working conditions, as well as reduce the harassment and other points that Dr. Sania made. And another area on the skill side is more on the digital jobs, and this is something where women can work from home without having to face harassment. And so more can be done here. And what we did in KP through the digital youth program, we encouraged a lot of women, a lot of young girls, to bring forward their technology capability, whether in coding or whether in machine language or whether in artificial intelligence. And when you attend these events, the energy that you see, it's just fabulous.
Yeah.
And it clearly tells you, if you only kind of remove those restrictions, the potential that Pakistan women have is enormous, and what the country can gain is even much larger. And when it comes to voice and agency, it comes down to what we can do to staff up our projects, how we can support government entities to have more women in their workforce. How can we find ways in which the workforce or the workplace becomes more safe and secure? They can do their work without getting harassed. And here we have one important requirement in our projects, that at least 30% of the staffing in project implementation units should be held by women. And I know that some projects in KP have already met these numbers, and in other provinces they're actually moving towards achieving this. So this is an important part of the voice and agency. Let me come back to the World Bank itself. We were 25% women in our workforce a few years ago. We are now up to 44%. I think that's a significant increase. And so we continue to see how we can bring more women into the workforce. And finally, on ownership and assets, and I think here is where, with 7% women having bank accounts, it clearly tells you there's a 93% availability there as a future potential. So what can you do to enhance financial inclusion? And here, as I told you before, the digital capacity and capability that is there today is going to make financial inclusion a possibility very soon, as we have seen in other countries. And the World Bank Group will continue to work in this direction. Similarly, looking at what we are doing in the housing program, under the Housing Finance Mortgage Program, we have sort of incorporated incentives whereby which if a woman is part of the ownership, then there is an incentive or an interest rate discount that is offered, which will encourage more women to sort of look at mortgages. And the other one, going back to linked to the asset as well as to the women's economic empowerment, is the whole mobility question. And here, the important thing we say is why urban transport is important, why public transport is critical, is when we did our Karachi transformation strategy and we did all that consultation, what came from various women groups is, you just give us a safe, secure way to travel from home to work and back, and we can flourish in the economic space. So if I have to just sum up the different strands that I was talking about, for the World Bank Group, this is a priority. As I said, it's all about engendering development for us, and how do we basically find more opportunities for women to be a big part of the economy of today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Lango. Thank you, Dr. Sanya, for in fact giving very impressive examples of how we are operationalizing the World Bank Gender Strategy, which is about, Dr. Sanya also very eloquently talked about health and education related initiatives. Elango talked about our initiatives on health and education, how we are creating more and better jobs for women, and also about assets and ownership, why it is important for overall women's economic empowerment agenda. So now we are going towards the end of this chat. So I would like to end this by asking about your personal commitments to this cause. So I would start with Elango. Elango, what do you think motivates you to fight for gender equality?
For me,
Yes.
it's the right thing to do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Sanya, what can you say? I mean, what keeps you motivated championing this agenda in Pakistan?
Well, I'd like to echo what Elango said. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, and I would add to it by saying that there's also a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Because in Pakistan, the state system does not impose the kind of constraints on women that some other countries do.
Yeah.
Some other Middle Eastern countries, for example. So there are, I can see at least 10 bright-faced women in this room. You work where you like, you dress the way you like, you're very confident in your skin. And there's no reason why women in Momand district and in the coastal areas and in South Punjab and interior Sindh cannot be in this way.
Yeah.
There is no reason for them to have no education. There is no reason for them to have 12 children each. There is no reason for them to live a life of oblivion. And I strongly believe that the reason why they are the way they are is because of societal reasons. And I think we have a huge opportunity to change that. We have some tools at our hand. We have the disruptive potential of smartphones, and there are policy levers through which smartphones can be made pervasive. There are ways in which the government can reach out to them with information, and we're working on ways to do that. There are ways in which to increase education at a primary level. There are ways in which to introduce a second chance program for girls in schools, and we floated an expression of interest as an entry point. And as Elango says, there are ways in which to make work sites safe for them, and there are specific policy strands to pull. And I believe that the lives of these women in these far-flung areas can change very dramatically if we make the right policy choices. So that is my motivation. I think that the government can, with a combination of the right choices, transform the lives of millions of women in this country. That is my motivation. And I really want to thank the World Bank, because in the World Bank I find an immense partner. And I look forward to working with all of you. And thank you, Elango, for your partnership.
You're welcome, Dr. Sanya.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanya and Elango, for your very, very inspirational talk. This is our International Women's Day event chat series that we just ended. We had with us Dr. Sanya Elango, who talked about their personal commitment on gender equality and why it is important for us all to believe in it, otherwise we won't be able to bring any kind of substantial change. Thank you very much. Please stay tuned in. We will have several other very interesting sessions on International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. Happy International Women's Week month. Thank you so much.